Alright, welcome back to the Magic Circle. We're just gonna have like a little conversation about. I've been rereading this old text that is kind of like a foundational book that most magicians read. It's called the Doctrine and Ritual of High Magic by Eliphas Levi, right? And that guy, let's take a look at what he looked like. He was actually a magician in France in the 18th century. And this was a particularly spiritual time for France. There was a spiritual revolution happening in Europe at that time. But he created one of the more long-lasting treatises, or whatever you want to call it. His book has lasted until today, and people still read it, still consider it a foundational piece of literature when it comes to occultism and learning about magic in general. So, I wanted to take a moment to talk about some of the major quotes that I've been rereading and just have like really stood out to me. I'm gonna try to explain them because they're a little heady. For some of you, it's not gonna be heady at all. For some of you, it will be because just the wording is dense. I'm gonna try to pull them apart because oftentimes what happens is if we rephrase them in different language, the actual phrase becomes much more palpable. So let's see what we got here. Our first quote right here is, "The world is a battlefield where liberty does battle with the forces of inertia by using the active force." This sentence is so packed with meaning that it stuck out for me for a while, and I ended up just kind of dissecting it, and I want to dissect it with you guys right now. So the reason I put it up on the screen is so that we can easily look at the sentence and see where we're going to take out and plug out certain words. Actually, I want to see if I can actually plug them out while we're watching. So, the world is a battlefield. Let's like babify it almost. Can I change it right now? Right? The world is a battlefield where liberty does battle with the forces of inertia by using the active force. What the heck does liberty mean? 1A is probably the best example of what this dude is trying to say, right? So, a battlefield. Let's flip back to the other screen and let's see what the heck is going on. Let's see if we can twist this up now that we have the definition, right? So, if liberty means the power to do as one pleases, let's just plug that in. Let's erase it. A battlefield where the power to do as one pleases does battle with the forces of inertia. See, we've reached another roadblock for me personally, because inertia is just like vague as hell. Obviously, we're talking about two opposing energies. We've got the power of liberty, the power to do as one pleases, and then the opposite enemy on the battle, which is apparently these forces of inertia. So what did the forces of inertia mean? This time, let's see. We go over here and we type in inertia. Inertia, the property of matter. It's something that matter does, by which it remains at rest or in uniform motion in the same straight line unless acted upon by some external force. Let me bring it back because I want you guys to understand why the fuck it's so interesting. So at this time in occult history, like we weren't very cultured on each other's traditions back then, to be honest. So the reason that that's important, the reason that's very interesting, is because it aligns really well with the Eastern philosophy of karma. So if you've ever heard of the law of karma, right? We usually think of it as like, somebody hurt us or somebody does something bad. And so what that means is that God or the universe or whatever is going to equally deal in measure the badness that they did onto them again. So don't do bad things, because probably bad things will happen to you if you do bad things. The problem with that is that is not the original idea of karma. That's like a kind of bastardization that has happened over the years. It's more the direct definition of karma is closer to cause and effect. Karma is the effect of the causes that you've created. So when people say that when you do bad things will happen, you'd have to make it more personal to understand the true meaning. So if some dude becomes a bank robber, which would be considered a bad thing, he now has to live the rest of his life on the run from the police. That's not fun. That's not particularly like a fun life. It's actually a very strenuous and stressful lifestyle. So that would be the karma of becoming a bank robber. This is a book that's been translated into English from French. Not every country is going to have a word that specifically define or coincides with karma. And so he tried his best by inputting the forces of inertia. Because if we go back to the web search, the web search says that inertia is a property of matter, the material world that we live in, by which it remains at rest or in uniform motion in the same straight line unless acted upon by some external force. In other words, so I try to have fun with pulling the words apart and trying to see what the deeper definitions of the words are. So what they're trying to say is that when something is moving in a straight line, inertia will make it continue moving in that direction unless something else stops it. That's what inertia is. So karma is very similar to this. Karma says that we have like a type of inertia. But when we do bad things, that inertia goes towards badness. When we do good things, that inertia goes towards goodness. Good and bad are relative. We'll talk about that in another video. But they're relative, but we're still human. We're still human, so there's still a human good and a human bad. So we're still talking, so when he's talking about the forces of inertia, he's talking about all of inertia. Let's go back to the quote. He's talking about all of the inertia in the universe. How do we talk about the forces of inertia then? What do we just call it karma? Do we just literally just put in karma? Well, karma is really not a good descriptor, because karma is really like more of like an umbrella term for all of the cause and effects. But if we're talking about the inertia, we're really more talking about destiny. We're talking about the forces of fate. And this makes more sense when you see all of the media, all of the interesting fairy tales and stories and legends that we have had about our greatest heroes overcoming a great and terrible fate. Fates are meant to be overcome, right? Destiny sounds different. Destiny is something that's good. It's your destiny to be a hero. It's your destiny to be a magician. But it's your fate to be something else, right? Fate can be fickle. Fate is different. Fate is more of like the culmination of all of your effects, the culmination of all of your karma. The world is a battlefield where the power to do as one pleases does battle, or the forces of fate, by using the active force, which we can actually just call like activity, right? If we're gonna just shorten it. So Eli is giving us the magician's definition of the world. The world is a battlefield. Battlefields are interesting because a battlefield is really just a place where we can talk openly about duality, right? In a battlefield, there's two enemies. There's two opposing ideas. And so the world is a place where there are opposing ideas. And the two opposing ideas is the power to do as one pleases and the forces of fate. How do we figure out how to do what we please by using activity? Right? So, in other words, if you want to get like buff, if you want to get stronger, for years you have not been strong. For years you have not been working out. For that, those years of you not working out, not activating, have a domino effect. They have a snowball effect. They turn you into maybe an image of yourself that you don't necessarily want. And so if you're trying to fight against the forces of inertia, so that you can do as you can have the power to do as you want, liberty. So you can be liberated from cause and effect. You have to be able to use activity. And that is the whole point of ritual magic. Ritual magic, we'll talk about it more as we go deeper, but the actual ritual part, the physicalities of it, go along with that definition of, for there to be change, there must be an activity. There must be activation. So if you want to get stronger, you have to actually change the cause and effect by creating new causes. So what's our second quote? We've got another quote here for you. I feel like that one's a really good one. And I really wanted to get you guys acquainted with it. You are called to be a monarch of the air, of water, of the earth, and of fire. But to reign over these 4 symbolic animals, you must conquer them and put them in chains. And if you've been following the stream on Twitch, when we do our tarot readings, we've been talking about the 4 symbols of the tarot, of the pip cards. These are the sword, the wand, the cup, and the pentacle. Those 4 symbols, they're representational of the 4 elements. These 4 elements that are being mentioned here in this quote are some of the most important archetypes to learn about when you are becoming a magician. I use the word magician to identify a magic user. Let's do exactly what we were doing with the last one, right? And let's change this, right? Because we know that if they're treating these 4 elements like animals, and they're saying we must conquer them and put them in chains, what they really mean, right, is we must domesticate them. We've got these 4 pip cards and these 4 elements, but what do the pip cards have to do with the elements? Right now I have a nice little image for you guys. I'm going to pull it up on the web search. As you can see, let's view this file. Let's pull it up a little bit bigger. So we've got the pentacles, the wands, the cups, and the swords up on top. And right now we have their meanings right here. Right here it says symbolism, health, wealth, and physical. Creativity, action, passion, love, emotion, empathy, thought, challenge, and observation. Here we go, got one. This one's another really good one. Right here, suit of wands, suit of coins, suit of swords, suit of cups. Like suit of wands connects with fire, right? So we're talking about each one of these quotes. Let's take a look at the quote again. You are called to be a monarch of the air, of water, of the earth, and of fire. So what does the air mean according to the web search? According to the web search, air is the intellectual, the concepts, thinking, reasoning. So if we go back to the quote, we can change air to intellect. It says of water next. Well, what does water mean? And the water is emotion, opinion, psychic instinct. So if we go back, so we're going to go back to the quote, and we're going to change water to emotion. Next it says of the earth. Well, what is earth? Earth is practical, sensation, opportunities, groundedness. Let's say we switch out the word earth for sensuality. and fire. Lastly is fire. So what does the web search say that fire is all about? Enthusiastic, ambition, power, intuition. So let's go back to the quote. Let's put power. According to Eli over here, you're called to be a monarch of the intellect, of emotion, of sensuality. Let's get rid of that and of power. But to reign over these four symbolic animals, you must domesticate them. And let's get rid of symbolic because they're no longer symbolic, right? We decoded it. It's saying you are called to be a king or a queen. You are called to be a monarch. You are called, but it's not that simple. It's a huge responsibility. You have to actually manage and rule over your kingdom. And this quote is saying that your kingdom you are asked to rule over is fire, air, earth, and water. Get a tarot deck, get used to those symbols, get used to those meanings, and always remember that we're not really talking about fire, we're not really talking about water, we're not really talking about earth, and we're not really talking about air. Now, what's our last quote for the day? Last quote for the day is a long one. And I wanted to include this one because I wanted to include it as Eli's answer to what is a magician. The mage is actually what the ancient Hebrew Kabbalists called the microprosopus. That is to say, the creator of the little world. The first magical science, and also the first of all works of science, was knowledge of oneself. It is that which contains all the others, and which is the principle of the great work. It is the creation of oneself. The mage is actually what the ancient Hebrew Kabbalists called the microprosopus. Why are the ancient Hebrew Kabbalists important? Because they're very influential in occultism and in all sorts of witchcraft. Even if you practice a form of witchcraft that it doesn't have anything to do with the Hebrew system, doesn't use the Hebrew letters, maybe you're a Wiccan, or maybe you're like more Norse, or maybe, it doesn't matter what it is, believe it or not, your system has been influenced by the Hebrew system. And that's okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything is Hebrew. There's actually a deeper history to that. Maybe we'll talk about that in the future as well. But for now, I just want to acquaint you with some of these terms. I want to acquaint you with the term, the Hebrew Kabbalists, because they were, let's say, a sect of magicians, Jewish magicians. Great work is another term that I want to acquaint you guys with, because every occultist is acquainted with it on some level or another. The great work is the idea that we all have a deep, inside of us, there is a destiny. There is a reason for our life. There is a specific, the great work is the idea, and it's a magician idea. You're not really going to hear it anywhere else. The great work is the idea that each one of us has a reason for our existence. Not a thing that we were meant to do, but more like a certain flavor of energy. Magicians genuinely believe this. They genuinely believe that when you are in sync with your flavor, with your sauce, that everything comes together. And you become your strongest version of yourself, of disconnection with our deeper life path, you could say. But the great work is kind of like your life path. The reason we call it the great work is because we consider us all doing the same action. So in other words, your life path might be to make ice cream for the rest of your life. Believe it or not, it might bring you intense joy to sell ice cream, for example, specifically. And if it does bring you intense joy, then that's how you know that it is your life path. But here's the thing, right? You might not be selling ice cream. You see what I'm saying? You might want to sell ice cream, but you've convinced yourself that you need to be an accountant. And then that, although you might make money, you might actually succeed at being an accountant, you won't be very happy. You won't feel the level of joy that you would feel if you were selling ice cream. And so the idea is that that unhappiness will inevitably undo the situation, and it's not that it's doomed from the start. It actually is not doomed. You actually might end up being an accountant for the rest of your life, and then you die, and then you're an accountant, and you never actually. So that's why we call it the great work, and we also talk about it in a lot of different ways. One of the ways that we acknowledge it is the fact that not everyone is able to achieve it. Not everyone is able to actually recognize their path on the great work, and it is part of magic, and it is part of the spiritual path and the magical path to kind of make people aware of this and allow them to start to question and try to find what is their life path on the great work. What is their version of the great work? So let's go back to the quote. At the deepest level, knowing your life path is just us wanting to know about ourselves. It's just us wanting to know ourselves deeply. But to do that, we have to be courageous sometimes, because you might think that you know yourself. And that's why the first part is also important. It says, the microprosopis is the creator of the little world. This is a book from the 18th century, right? Eli over here is telling us we create our own world. We create our world. And the mages, we are aware of this creative process. By being aware of this creative process, we are now able to take part in it instead of being at the whims of the forces of inertia. We are the creator of the little world. We decide to take control of ourselves. I'm sorry. So in other words, if you're not happy, then you are not aligned with the great work. It doesn't matter what it is that you choose to do, and that's the thing, is that when we think about destiny, we usually think about greater purpose. Sometimes the earth is like a gigantic computer system with all these tiny cogs inside of it, and we are all little tiny cogs in that. When we're talking about the great work, we're talking about that computer system. When we are our happiest, when we feel fulfilled, that is when we know that we're in line. That is when we know that our cogs are directly lining up with all the other cogs and turning the whole system with everything else. We are human beings, and we are part of nature. It's not humans, it's not man versus wild. It's nature, period. Everything is nature. And so we have to start there. We have to recognize that there's a lot of room for growth. There's a lot of the universe that we have not discovered yet. The only way that we can grow as people is by, again, taming those four animals. The air is the mental. The water is the emotions. The earth is our material well-being or sensualities. Fire, which is our creative passions. We can't be ruled by these things. We have to conquer them. The first step is recognizing these things and becoming aware of them. And then, as you become aware of them, your sensitivity increases, your psychic powers increase, your ability to perceive synchronicity increases, your ability to converse with your holy guardian angel, which we'll talk about in the future streams, increases. It is truly as if you've become a monarch, a different type of monarch. You don't roll over human beings, that's for sure. Wisdom dictates that we're all gods, we're all stars, we're all equal. But what's more important is that you rule over your own kingdom. There's an infinitude within you, a microcosm. And that microcosm, holds an infinite number of beings, an infinite number of personalities, an infinite number of places, and you are the ruler of that. This is your temple, the Magick Temple. This is your submarine in this ocean world that we live in. This is your submarine. And we use it to get around, we use it to see things. And it's these ways, it's by getting control of these parts of us that we can gain control of our vehicle. You have to know how to use a pencil in order to draw a beautiful portrait. You actually have to know how to use it. You have to know how to use power tools in order to actually fix things or put something together. You actually have to know how to use the tool first. Without knowledge of how to use the tool, without knowledge of how to use a computer, you cannot Google the information that you so need. And so it's the same way with life. In wisdom, they teach us that we have to learn how to use our bodies first. We have to learn how to overcome our emotions, our sensualities, our passions, and our intellect in order to gain control over our vehicle and be able to finally overcome our biases and truly see some wisdom and be able to connect with the greater streams of energy and forces that are out there. It's all about exposure. Even if you disagree, the exposure to it is like fertilizer. You know, it will help you with other ideas that you have. And either way, these are some of the more foundational ideas. So by talking about the foundational ideas, we'll at least create a kind of base for future videos and future talks. Anyway, thanks for joining us. And again, like, subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment, do all this stuff, and we'll see you next time.